Good morning, everybody. My name is Leslie Ann Johnson. Welcome to this morning's press conference. We're here to talk about the settlement agreement between the government of Grenada and WRB Enterprises. It's good to have you if you're joining us on Channel 22, the Facebook or the YouTube pages, or you are in the diaspora. Good morning to you, and of course, to our colleagues joining us via Zoom. We have with us here the Honorable Gregory Bowen. He's to my right, the Minister for Finance, Public Utilities, Energy, Physical and Economic Development. And to my left, the Honorable Oliver Joseph, Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Business and CARICOM Affairs. So without any further ado, we'll hand things over to the Honorable Gregory Bowen. Good morning.
Thank you, Madam Host, and my colleague, Minister Joseph, members of the press, and to the listening and viewing public. This morning, we are here to expand on the public statement that we made recently, only yesterday, and to give an idea of the background to the present situation, and that give rise to the settlement. We want to elaborate, although it was clearly stated in the statement, the timing of our release. We want to touch briefly again on the state of the generating equipment that is in Grenada. And finally, from my standpoint, Minister Joe, I may have other things to add. How and where do we go from now? So with respect to the background, and to clarify in particular, I know many people are coming more on board with it. One, it was not government who initiated the actions that resulted in a tribunal award. And two, the reason why we are here is because of an agreement signed in 1994 by the then NDC administration, which at the point at the sale of Grenada, the certain shares, majority shares in Grenada, the conditions of a monopoly in the electricity sector, and two, the conditions by which the repurchase event is to be settled in such a case. So while this press conference cannot do it, we would certainly want to elaborate on what was in that share purchase agreement. And at this particular point in time, the repurchase event, and this is of fundamental importance because it is in this repurchase event that the prices came, how much you pay, and how much, whenever a repurchase event will occur, that the state will have to pay for it. And the repurchase event is simply this. Under certain conditions, with WRB majority share owners, if certain things happen, then the state must buy it back. And not only buy it back, but buy it back under a condition that has no relation with the real value of the share, the fair value of the shares as it's referred to. And basically and quickly, some of those are, if a hurricane took place, decimated the country, and WRB feels that there's no more opportunity for them to make money, the state must buy it back. If the state passes law, an independent sovereign state that passes a law that they dislike, then the state must buy back. Again, if the currency of the country, happily we have a very strong EC dollar currency, but if that failed, it is pegged at 2.7 to the dollar, US dollar, but assuming that we got into difficulty, the OECS region, and we have to pay, the peg is like 10 or 12 EC dollars to the US, then they could give up and say, buy it back from me. And what is worse? Buy it back in US dollars. In fact, the formula that you'll pay is not what is the value of it, because in 1994, they paid 15 million EC. 1 year later, according to the formula, if government had to buy it back, we had to pay 50.5 million EC. And remember, that was in 1995, 1996. So from 15, you went over 4 times, right? Close to 4 times, close to 60. So 3+ times the value. And that is the formula that is at play now. But that was signed in 1994. In fact, I attended the arbitration. And there is no way, the tribunal said, we could get out of what was signed in 1994. While we dislike it, while no one could see why you did not use a fair value method, but if you went and signed this in 1994, there's a little that we can do. Another important point we want to touch on now is the state of the generating plant. When we held discussions with a lot of people on where we were after the tribunal ruled, and they indicated to us that we should do everything so as not to get into a load shedding cycle, maintain the reliability of the plant. But what is the state of the generating plant in Grand Lake at this particular point in time? We are at a state where load shedding has occurred. We are at a state when if the largest engine is taken off for maintenance and anything happens to another base set, then we will have load shedding. I make this point because it is obvious that the idea was to run the system down, do not invest. And again, that came out strongly at the tribunal hearings, that the investment made in the company was zilch. So that if government is forced to buy it back, what will happen immediately after? You'll see a spate of load shedding. The public is not aware that we have already reached that stage. So that is why we're looking now at a very competent management company to, besides getting us into the 21st century with respect to renewables and meeting all our commitments, we must manage ourselves out of this particular situation. I'm not casting aspiration of anybody in Grand Lake. I just want the public to know. Why was it planned? Because just as it took us to the arbitration, every year Grand Lake pays dividend. But at that particular point, they paid a special dividend of $57 million. They had to borrow $48 million, 32 of which went into paying the special dividend, and they used 25 million free money. I'm making this point. Free money means in their coffers. I'm making this point to say that that 57 million of extraordinary dividend should have been plowed back into the company so that we have generating sets now, such that if the largest engine is taken out for maintenance and something happens to the next largest engine, you still have sufficient engine to maintain the status quo with respect to reliability. We do not have this. So it is against this backdrop that we went into negotiations with Grand Lake. We did not have a choice, not with Grand Lake, WRB. We did not have a choice because the tribunal had already ruled that we had passed a certain law or suite of laws which remove the monopoly and which gave a regulatory body the power to set rates. And every time that body sought to operate, then we had a court case from Grand Lake stroke WRB to say, no, you cannot do this, and no, you cannot do that. One simple issue is in the telecommunication sector, all the providers know they must contribute to the upkeep of the NTRC. Now, Grand Lake is the only generating company at the point in time, but if you have others, as the liberalization anticipate, then they too will contribute to the upkeep of the NTRC, of the POC. But every time a request is made to pay for or to make that contribution, you have a battle. Last year it was not paid. The reason why is given, you made the request too late. This year it was not paid for another reason. So we cannot continue to operate in this particular system. Again, it was not the government moving to take it over. It is because they forced us in arbitration. And we articulated quite clearly in the press release the result of the arbitration, and I want to thank my colleague and Minister on Foreign Affairs Minister now for the total support given, because we were on that government negotiating team, both of us, when we reduced from 75 million, what government should have paid with interest, to 63 million. And on top of that 63 million, we got 11.6% of some of the shares they held outside unknowingly to be placed back into government. So we end up with 61.6% when we started negotiated for the 50% that we should purchase. So all in all, we have approximately 20 million savings or reduction from the award case. Why we say 20 million? Because the $11.6 million could have been sold for between $6 to $8 million at arm's length, that is US dollars. So with the 12 plus that value of 8 million, we could say that government really came off with a $20 million discount. So with that background, I will now ask about the host to give my colleague a chance. And I know that the press release, has gone out. But before I do that, why did we not make a press statement at the same time as WRB? Because, as my colleague will tell you, we signed a framework agreement. And I told the press this when they were asking questions before. And under the framework agreement for the negotiations, we should not say anything about the negotiations, anything about the arbitration that brought the negotiations, or divulge anything during the period of negotiation. We anticipate that at the end of it, we'll make a joint statement. And this can be borne out by Robert G. Blanchard, the president and CEO of WRB, which issued a statement to the Green Lake Board, reminding them that this is under confidentiality. They were supposed to be doing something to finalize the settlement, and nothing should be said. All of us, therefore, clearly understood that we should come together before we start to issue statement. We proposed a joint statement, and they thought they could not go along with what was in it. As a matter of fact, they were issuing statement long before. So when we issued that statement on the 29th, that was the closing date for negotiations. And there were certain important documents that we had not received as yet. So while they were out there doing things, they had nothing to lose. Because the shares, some of the shares in Green Lake, we only found out had a lien on them. And so the state had to protect itself by getting certain warranties and releases from WRB to say that if the shares that came back to the state had any lien on it, then that is your responsibility. You must clear the lien. That particular document did not come to us until Monday morning. And if we violated certain conditions of the negotiations, then they could legally withhold such document. So we are very clear. No statement should be made. We follow that. And when we got the document and when they withdrew from the joint statement, that is why our statement came out at the point that it did. You may say it came out a bit later, that the government was tight-lipped, but we were very clear on what we were doing. Thank you, Madam Jules.
Thank you, Honorable Gregory Bowen. We now hand over to Honorable Oliver Joseph.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the media, to this press briefing. I think that we need to just look at what transpired. So in 1994, WRB bought majority share in Green Lake. And we had this monopoly operating. And when the NMP government came into office, we decided that we need to regulate the sector and open it up for competition in keeping with the trend in the rest of the world. Because when you have competition, you have greater efficiency and lower prices. And therefore, the government moved to pass legislation to liberalize the sector and put in a regulation in place. WRB, having signed an agreement with the previous government, in which it states that if we change the laws under which they operate to take away the monopoly, to put it simple, then we must repurchase the company. They then went further to take the matter to the International Court for Settlement of International Dispute, and they ruled in their favor. As explained by Minister Bowen, the ruling dealt strictly with the share purchase agreement and the calculation of what price should be paid. So the price was not based on fair market value, which you would do in normal course of business. If you have to sell an asset, you will look at what is the fair market value. That was not used because the formula in the second schedule stated clearly how the calculation must be done in the event of a repurchase. Why is it that the government moved to pass legislation? It's very simple. Electricity costs in Grenada is one of the highest in the entire CARICOM region. In fact, when I look at Trinidad electricity costs, Grenada cost is 7 times higher when you look at the cost per kilowatt hours. Businesses were not attracted to Grenada to go into manufacturing because the input cost of electricity is so high that the output costs will, of course, be high, because electricity is a main component of your input costs. And therefore, we were not seeing any new businesses that are operating where they have to use a high amount of electricity. And therefore, it was stifling economic growth. And we had to move to deal with that situation. We could not continue with a situation where, as a government, we just said, let's leave the situation as it is to continue. So the decision was how we could benefit the people of Grenada. So what has happened? The state has repurchased Grenlec. So it belongs to the state asset. The governments are elected to manage the affairs of the state. So any government that comes will decide on how they will treat with that particular state asset. This government has decided that having repurchased Grenlec, we will hire a management company to run it and then offer shares to the Grenadian public, because government do not want to run Grenlec. So we will hire a management company to run it and offer shares, so it will, all the profits that were made over the years will be plowed back into the economy, and the Grenadian people will benefit from the profits. When you have WRB 50% of the shares and an affiliate company with 61.6% of the shares, when they pay dividend, then 61.6% goes to WRB and the affiliate company. So now it will go to Grenadians who will buy shares. You come to the government based on the shares that the government decide to keep. And that money then could be reinvested into the economy in other areas to help develop the country. So it is a positive thing that we now have control and could determine the future of electricity in Grenada. In fact, some people is of the view that water and electricity should always be in the control of government. There are some people with that philosophy. But we believe that even if government control it, that it should be managed separately, not by government. So government has no interest in managing the company. So as we move forward, we'll see once rates start coming down, you'll see greater investment in a lot of sectors. Even the tourism sector, some hoteliers will tell you that if they have guests that keep the AC on for the entire duration of the stay, sometimes when the month comes, they cannot pay the bill because it's just too high. And therefore, we think it is necessary as we move forward in our development plan. We have our development plan 2020-2035, which highlight the need for lower electricity costs in order to drive economic growth. That is clearly stated in the plan, and we will ensure that we see these things happening in the future. So I'll stop at this stage.
Thank you very much, Honorable Oliver Joseph. Colleagues, so you've heard from both ministers, Honorable Gregory Bowen and Honorable Oliver Joseph. We now turn over for your questions. Good morning to you once again.
Good morning, Leslie. And I have a question. Can I proceed?
Yes, good morning. Go right ahead. Turn down your phone.
I'm hearing an echo.
Turn down the level of your volume. You go right ahead.
Okay. So my first question, good morning. This is Kellen Bubb of the Bubb Report. Minister Bowen and Minister Joseph, my first question is to both of you gentlemen. Now, your government's legal team, when you appeared before the arbitration tribunal, you posited several arguments in 2019. The first one was that WRB refused to invest in renewable energy in Grenada. The second argument you posited was that WRB committed, in parentheses here, willful malfeasance in the management of Grenlec. Now, ministers, in reviewing the arbitration document, how then do you explain the commissioner's conclusion that if you consider WRB to be guilty of malfeasance, and I'm quoting now from paragraph 349 of the judgment, and the judgment says, quote, the government of Grenada would have applied to an international tribunal for the settlement of international disputes tribunal for section 7.9 declaration of extreme and willful malfeasance prior to repealing Grenlec's ATM monopoly. The state further that your government applied for a declaration of extreme or willful malfeasance, it might not have triggered the repurchase event such as what we're witnessing today. So that's my first question. Now, my second question is this, ministers. In the government's press release from December 29th, you intimated that the government of Grenada intends to encourage market-based renewable energy with support from both the World Bank and the International Renewable Energy Agency is what I believe. Now, going back to the tribunal report, how do you reconcile your public declarations against the view of the commissioners that both you as a government and Grenlec, they also pinned blame on Grenlec as well in this matter, failed to pursue renewable energy proposal with much vigor, as you assert? Now, and this is from paragraph 140 of the report. And further, in deference to the current administration, the commission did admit that also Grenlec was under no obligation to pursue renewable energy because of the problematic nature of the 1994 NDC arrangement with WRB. And finally, the tribunal orders that the state repay $75 million to WRB. Now, your press release asserts that you will be paying $9 million less as part of a downward negotiation with the company. Now, the question I think a lot of folks in Grenada have is, from what source are these funds coming from, ministers? From when, in fact, when we think about the current revenues, estimates of revenues and expenditure that was just read, it really does not address that particular debt commitment. Is this repayment arrangement coming from entities that have expressed an interest in purchasing these shares? And finally, is there a non-disclosure agreement in place that may preclude the general public from having any awareness of the new shareholding arrangement before a new agreement is arrived at? So those are my questions. If you want me to repeat them, or if there is a second round, I would gladly indulge you. Thank you.
I think we'll have to assist both Minister Joseph and myself with the questions because there were many. I think that the first question was to do with willful malfeasance. Yes, the tribunal did indicate, but I was there, that while the arguments were extremely in line and well put, that we should have gone to an international center and make that claim before. As a matter of fact, we should have done many things. We recall the situation, back here. And the company itself and the tactics they used. As a matter of fact, I attended a meeting with the Prime Minister when a special envoy came from the United States Secretary of Department, very high up. And this envoy came through the advances of WRB to their state. Okay. So I'm saying no more on this, just to tell you the situation that we were in with respect to taking certain actions against WRB. And in promoting that argument, the special dividend of $57 million was at the forefront in the sense that they were not investing and they were taking out. And the special dividend says that you're getting your usual dividends, for which the shareholders were very happy. But on top of that, you will extract. And remember, it's a judicial responsibility of the directors to tell the shareholders, even though you own this, we will see that the company gets the right investment. But they control the board. And they had to use the special vote given to the chairman. In other words, all the local directors say, this should not happen. And they overrode the local directors and went on to do that. So the first question that you've asked, you must look at the entity. We're dealing with WRB only? Okay, and secondly, there was proof enough for the malfeasance. The fact that the tribunal made that statement, what they were basically saying, had you taken another route and taken WRB to the tribunal, we'd have said, yes, there was malfeasance, and this would not have happened. You could help me with that.
There was one he asked about, it was not represented in the estimates, so he wants to know where the money is coming from to pay.
Yeah, the monies came from the state to pay. It was not represented in the estimate because we could not have done a lot of things during the COVID time, and the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance has already alluded to this. Then we had room in the budget approved for capital projects. And remember, the return of the shares in Green Lake is a capital issue. And so under the budgetary arrangement for 2020, there was room in there. Maybe you might say the COVID assisted so that we did not have to expend things. And so there was room allocation in the budget. And since you can move capital expenditure around, the authority was there under the budget for 2020. There was no loan to say you have to come for a loan agreement. Things were approved. And the 180 shortfall, which is down now to about 130 shortfall for the end of the year, only had to do with cash. And so remember, this government did a lot in managing the economy from 2013 to present. And so we had the wherewithal, although it is certainly difficult to find and do that cash, we had the wherewithal to make the pay. As a matter of fact, we now must look to replenish wherever the cash may have come from. But I want to say categorically, even without you asking, that there is no one lined up, in other words, who push the cash to the government, and so they have a fundamental right to say the shares will go to them. During the negotiations with WRB, we told them that they could sell the shares to anybody. So companies did approach them and companies did approach us. But coming to the settlement agreement, none of these companies would have paid what the WRB wanted. And so they told them quite squarely that we will not pay for this, and so the arrangements broke down.
Thank you, Minister. Kellon, was there another question?
Yes, so I had another question. Again, I am citing from the tribunal report, which I have in my possession. Mr. Bowen and Mr. Joseph, part of the settlement agreement requires that the government of Grenada and WRB compensate the commissioners, pay the legal fees for the commissioners. I see that the government had a very large legal team going into this arbitration. Now, can you give us a sense of the cost to the Grenadian purse that was borne out for your legal representation during the course of that tribunal? And to follow up on what you just said, so you said that Grenlec is now a state asset. Would this remain the status quo? Would this be part of the course moving forward? Or does government plan? Because remember, you indicated that you're hoping that the energy sector in Grenada would operate within this particular new liberalized framework. And obviously it goes back to parts of the legislation that your government in fact passed in Parliament to liberalize the sector, which Grenlec, WRB had objections to. So how does that comport your government's commitment to ensuring that Grenlec remains a state entity, while at the same time wanting to follow through with plans to deregulate the sector? And my final part of this question is,
Kellon, sorry, please make it quickly because we have other people to make it quickly, please.
Will we be seeing your government having initiatives to ensure that the regulatory commission is fully staffed to move forward with those things? What does that look like? I think that's it for me for questions.
Firstly, the cost to the government for the legal team was in the vicinity of $5 million, between 5 and 6. And I know definitely our cost was less than the opponent cost because these costs had to be disclosed to the tribunal. And you mentioned about remaining a state body. No, the liberalization of the sector could entertain both scenarios, because what could not have happened is that another party could not come and build a solar plant and sell the power to Grenlec. So liberalization of the sector doesn't mean you split up Grenlec only. You could do that, or you could change shares in it. But what will happen now, and a lot of people have been showing interest, the independent power producers, the IPP, you build a plant, you sell to Grenlec. A local person with a unit, solar unit on their home, on their houses, they can sell the excess to Grenlec. But what could not have happened before the liberalization was any other person being able to generate or transmit electricity in the country. So there is no bearing on what will happen to Grenlec, whether it will remain a state enterprise, to say that the liberalization will not happen. And the Prime Minister made it clear, all of us made it abundantly clear that we want to pass the shares to our Grenadian people. That does not have much to do again with the liberalization.
Thank you very much, Minister. GBN, good morning. GBN, good morning. Go right ahead.
Hi, good morning.
Go ahead, we're hearing you.
Jared from GBN. Minister, we have highlighted on Minister Bowen, you have highlighted on load sharing already happening at the Grenlec plant. How would the government, or well, via the new management, company, whoever you hire, will be able to rectify that and move forward in the sector, which would be liberalized and would be competing with other companies, private individuals?
Thank you for your question. The private management company will ensure that the necessary investment gets into the company, and they will ensure the transition from fossil fuel to renewable fuel. In other words, they will follow the government 20-35-year plan and ensure that we get through with it. And remember, the situation of liberalization is the company Grenlec itself does not have to invest only, They can invest, but you have other persons coming in and building plant and investing, and you have the connection into Grenlec system where Grenlec buys block power from them and then distribute to consumers in Grenada. So it is not a difficult exercise at all. And what I want to indicate, the passage of the laws that we did, and Minister Joseph spoke about, it did not come by sitting the government saying, oh, I want to antagonize Grenlec, It came from economic development plans that the multilateral saw, and from which our 2035 plan has emerged, in the sense that the World Bank provided $10 million loan to a project called Xera, and they went throughout Grenada and the St. Lucia. Other countries in the OECS can join as they see fit. Some of them, because the monopoly in most cases was with the government, some of them feel, well, to liberalize, they may not like that. But it was open to them as well. And it showed the economic benefits to our country of liberalization and moving for Grenada to be able to fulfill its international commitment. Where do you think we got the $135 million grant for NAWASA from the Green Climate Fund? It is because of these arrangements, because the legislation was passed. So the government, had to do something. We are now facing $300 million project making St. George a smart city, the first smart city in the Caribbean. If we do not make our contribution of reducing our carbon footprint by 40%, which means that because 70% comes from transportation and electricity, that we have to reduce that. As a matter of fact, we should have been 25%. We should have had 25% of our plants generating by renewable. And we got the monies for NAWASA because we planned to do this. We made a commitment. How much do we have now? I want to thank the general manager in Grenlec for correcting a statement I made. I said we had no more than 6%. He immediately told me, please don't say that. We only have 1.5%. That's where we are, where we should have been 25%. What will happen now to our geothermal project? It all came because of our commitment to that. People like the GCF and the GF and others, they're pulling back and say, if you're doing nothing, why should we give you more grant? Why should we find financing for you? So I think the questions that are coming out are quite good, and people must understand where we're at. The United Arab Emirates gave us 600 grant kilowatt plant for CARICOM and Petit Martinique. At the point in time, and we are just about to save. I know Minister Joe doesn't like the word save, because Grenlec will not give us a letter saying that we'll interconnect that solar plant in CARICOM to the system. We were under serious problems, and we could have lost that. Now, one of the first things to be done is for Grenlec to just tell IRENA and the United Arab Emirates, who's giving us a grant of $3.2 million for the plant in CARICOM, that at least your plant will be interconnected. Other persons who have solar panels will be interconnected. Those who want, I know about local Grenadian entrepreneurs who want to build a 5 megawatt plant and sell to Grenlec. That will happen. These are the things that we are precluded under the lack of reform, that although the law was passed, Every day there was a challenge in the court, making us lose. I could have lost millions of dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. GBN, we'll come back to you in a second if you have another question. Linda Straker, good morning.
Good morning to everyone. I myself do have a number of questions. However, my first question has to do with where Minister Bowen would have ended on the ISIRA. The World Bank final report on ISIRA described the project as moderately unsatisfactory. As a matter of fact, it achieved nothing great in St. Lucia, and none of the other islands were able to join on for various reasons. Grenada was the only country that was able to pass law to liberalize the sector. It therefore means that a World Bank project that is seen as unsatisfactory is what Grenada is using as its masterpiece. How can the minister explain that to the people on the outside? This is a World Bank report, it's public disclosure, and that project itself was described as moderately unsatisfactory. That is my first question. The Grenada now is turning to the World Bank and IRENA to help them select a management company. So a failed World Bank project is now using again the World Bank to appoint a management company. What is the timeline for the appointment of such a company to be functioning in terms of managing Grenada? And my third question for now is, Minister Oliver Joseph said that the price was not based on fair market value. Has government hired or in itself did any form of evaluation to share with us what should have been or what is estimated to be the fair value of Grenada as it is now? Because you would have said it was based on fair value. It was not based on the fair value. What is the present fair value of Grenada based on government estimate using professional consultancy? The timeline for hiring this company through World Bank and IRENA, and explain to us why the government of Grenada is continue to work along with World Bank to implement the liberalization of the electricity sector under a project that the World Bank itself described as unsatisfactory. I do have more, so I will ask follow-up.
Well, as I indicated before, why did the World Bank say it was unsatisfactory? Because the other countries did not join in. If you go further in that same report, and if you listen to the interactions that we've had, because Grenada took the bold step to do what was necessary, and you're saying, why do you walk along with the World Bank? Where else are we getting 0.75% interest, 40 years loan, 10% grace? It is because the bank saw that Grenada had the foresight and the will to take the necessary steps, not only in this situation with the energy sector, but in many other situations where we tightened the belt and did what was necessary. So unsatisfactory, I tell you, means that the other countries did not come on board. And St. Lucia came on board. They do have their own problems in there. Long before, the ownership was split in 5, each one of them at 20%. And so there were certain measures and certain things that once, government is involved, as you'll have in many of the other countries, they don't want to liberalize. That does not mean that they're operating at the best efficiency. But at the same time, they will not encounter the problems that we have because they control the sector. So why do they put somebody to regulate the price when we control the sector and can regulate the price? But in Grenada, we see the benefits of having a Public Utilities Regulatory Commission that is well staffed now and that is under operation. Thank you.
I think Linda, when the moderately unsatisfactory report came out, it is in the project implementation, not in the project, So if the World Bank give you a project, they fund it because they think it's the best thing. After a period of time, they do yearly evaluation. And it's from the project implementation because, as Minister Bowen indicated, the other countries did not proceed with it. So that is how they label the implementation of the project, but not the project itself. That's a different thing. And then we have several projects with the World Bank. So when you say, why are we turning to the World Bank? The World Bank are the ones that given us concessionary loan and providing the expertise. There are several projects we have going on with the World Bank, and they do evaluation of all of them. And so we are comfortable because the World Bank honestly gave their honest report in the implementation phase. And we will continue to work with the bank and have to improve on our implementation rate. That is what we need to do so that we get a better rating or better remarks from them. So that is what I wanted to say with respect to your comment of why we're going ahead with the World Bank when they made that statement. It was on the implementation of the project. As we said, no, the fair market value was not used because in the share purchase agreement, there is a formula there for repurchase. So we could not use, the tribunal did not accept any fair market value that says you agreed, or the government at the time agreed to the formula. So that is the formula they must use. So even though we put forward a case to say, well, in business, if you want to purchase an asset, you must use fair market value, they say, well, sorry, look at the agreement that was signed between the government and WRB at the time, and therefore the arbitration has no option but to apply Schedule 2 to using the formula that is in there. And that is why it came out at that price.
Just to add, yes, lots of studies was done on fair market value. In fact, if you look at the report, you'll see the values there.
Yeah, with respect to the time frame, we remember this has just concluded. A lot of work has to be done still in finalizing everything. The shares has now been passed on to government. As Minister Bowen indicated clearly, is a management company will be as in the quickest possible time, against with assistance from the World Bank. We work with them with the quickest possible time, because government has no intention, as I said, of running the company. I made that clear. The cabinet has made that abundantly clear that it is not the intention that for the government to run it. So a management company will be put in place as soon as possible, working with the World Bank, and then the prospectus and everything has to be done, hiring an accounting firm to determine the share value, and all this has to take place before you could go to the market and offer the shares to the public.
Thank you very much.
And just 1 minute of added clarity. Minister Joseph, I really wanted if government could share with the Grenadian public what is possibly the current value of Grenada as to compare with what they actually receive. And secondly, I am fully aware, I think, of the process of how World Bank operates, from procurement, prospectus, and so forth. Whilst we wait for the management company to be appointed and accepted, what would be how Grenada will be operating? Because Grenada is now a privatized company or a state-owned company. What is the structure? Is it going to operate as if it is a statutory body? Explain to the public the structure of Grenada we're going to be operating while we await that management. And is with government having the majority shareholders, government is now seen as the owner. What structure? Because to the best of my knowledge, the structure operated is a statutory body or you're nationalized. However, Grenada itself is a privatized institution. What structure will it operate in accordance with our Companies Act? Please explain that to the public, because these are basic things the public want to understand. Whilst we wait, electricity have to flow.
So let me quickly give a comment here. Grenada will continue to operate as a private company under the Companies Act. There'll be shareholders meeting. You have a good quantity of small shareholders around. They would meet. Before you do anything at the level, they'll appoint a board, etc. So it will just continue in the same strain, and where what they would have to do, maybe at the shareholders level, we will meet and authorize that it now be run by a management company. So this management company will continue to report to the board, but they will have certain prerogatives. And with the World Bank and IRENA and the GCF on board monitoring, their plans will be not like WRB, but to transition into renewables, to ensure that the government energy policy is followed, because that energy policy is based on 2035, which is based on discussions with the GCF, which is based on discussions with the World Bank, etc. So rest assured, you would not see it as a statutory body. You would not see it as an arm of government. It will follow its same notices to shareholders. You come and discuss, etc., and you appoint directors, etc. With the fair market value of Grenlec, a fair market value is treated at arm's length. When we did our research and report for the tribunal in 2017, thereabout, the fair market value ranged in between 30 and 35 million US dollars. That is for the 50%. So you got to double that for the 100% of Grenlec. Now, if you're looking at arm's length transaction, what people offered, and we know because we send the people to them, and people came to us, the highest figure we get as a willingness is about $40 million for the 20% of the shares. And that's what you call fair value. A transaction between a willing buyer and a willing seller. And that's the maximum I think they were offered, and they indicated, no, we don't want that, because we know what the intention was. I hope that answers your question.
All right. Good morning, Callistra. Callistra, are you there? Good morning.
Yes, I am here. Good morning. Thank you. I have no questions. First, I believe in 2013 or so, the government was given the opportunity to get Grenada 50% back at, I believe it was 80 million EC dollars. We've now paid 63 million US dollars. We've paid much more based on the share purchase agreement conditions. Can you explain to me, Minister, why at that time it was not in our best interest to accept that $80 million offer from Glenn? Also, you spoke about moving capital expenditure around in the budget. There were no allocations in the 2020 or the 2021 budget for repurchase of Grenlec. Can you and we've allocated funds for various specific things to be done in the country. I'm not sure if I heard wrong. I think I heard you say something about moving capital expenditure around, which will make it possible for us to make this payment without parliamentary approval. Can you explain that for me as well, please? I have other questions.
Well, the parliamentary approval was already given for capital expenditure. Now, within the rules of the Public Finance Management Act, yes, you can move capital expenditure around. You cannot move capital into recurrent. Yes? So when you have some expenditure that should have been done on capital work, and because of the lockdown and things, it was not done, you have that allocation already approved by Cabinet and under the Act, by the Parliament. And under Parliamentary Approval Act, you can move from one capital project into another. Yes, at the point in time.
Also on the
yes, let me just remember the question. Thanks. We were offered for 80 million. I think Minister Joseph and the Attorney General then, Carrington Hood, went to Miami, Florida with respect to that. In 2013, we just came out of a situation where we had to enter into a self-imposed structural adjustment program. We are not where we are today, with nearly 7 and 8 years of proper, prudent fiscal management that would have allowed us the resource. What do we have to do? What would we have done in 2013? We'd have had to borrow. And where would we go for borrowing to do this? Besides, the amount offered at that point in time, while they gave us that figure, we counter-offered them with a smaller figure, which we thought was the fair market value. They refused it. They came to us, only because they must come to us. And we said, we know that you have other people talking to. We will have no objection if you spoke with them. They spoke to a lot of other people, and none of the others paid the $80 million for it at that point in time. Mr. Joey, if you...
Yes, well, as you said, I was involved in the negotiations. the two things happened at the time. We just entered a structural adjustment program. Therefore, we could not borrow 80 million. Secondly, we did not think that was the fair market value, so we made a counter offer. They thought the counter offer was too low, because we hired an accounting firm to do the fair market value for us, and they said no, they would not accept our counter offer. And that is where the matter ended, and then they decided to proceed to the arbitration tribunal.
All right, colleagues, we have 3 minutes left. Anybody else with questions quickly? We have to wrap up shortly.
Yes, I have a question.
Wait,
My
Linda,
question is,
Linda,
Bowen,
Linda, hold 1 second, please. Callistra wasn't quite finished. 1 second. Sorry about that. Callistra, go ahead.
Yes, sorry, Leslie and Linda. Minister, on the moving capital expenditure, you're saying that the projects which we did not complete because of the lockdown, could you be a bit more specific? What projects have lost the money or lost the chance of going forward in the immediate future because of this? Explain to me how we gather $63 million out of the budget, given the situation that the reality that we were already struggling to meet the commitments for the things that we already have to do. I'm not understanding where we pulled the money from out of previous allocations. And as well, is there any deal with the Mount Hartman acres that we have that is down the Mount Hartman Resort project? Have we sold this property, and is there any connection to the reported situation with Grenlec and any future investment to anyone?
Well, first of all, I think Minister Joe might be more explicit than I was in the sense that allocation is not cash, Allocation is an authority and permission to spend. Raise the cash, and you can spend it. What the resolution before the House of Parliament is one, that we approve the expenditure. So the expenditure was approved already for certain capital works. Now, many times countries have approved expenditure, but they can't raise the cash. In case that you have the cash, therefore, you can only apply the cash to the approved allocation, and you can move the allocation around once they're in the capital bracket. And to say from wherever we replenish wherever the source of government funding, and being prudent managers, we are looking to replenish it. So whether it's income from IRD, Inland Revenue Department, or from the customs, or from assets sale, replenishing so that we come back and get a reserve to stage can happen from any source. Whether it's, you want to say, the sale of lands, etc., whether it's Livera, Mount Hartman, or in St. David, where we have 2 other projects going, sale of lands is sale of lands, it will go back into our reserve. Thanks. Minister, I don't know.
But because the Grenlec deal has been done, you cannot give specifics on exactly how we raised the $63 million. This is what I am trying to find out. It's something we've just completed. Where exactly did money come from? I understand, of course, that I understand what budgetary allocations are and the issue of not, cash and so on. I don't need that explained. I am saying, how exactly did we come up with this payment for Grenlec? Where?
It came from prudent management from 2013. It came from prudent management from 2013 to present. And then it came from the state's coffers.
Maybe, I think Mr. Bowen explained it, but so you have the 2020 budget we're talking about. So I've heard the comment that they did not see it in the 2021 estimate. It is not in the 2021, that's where it's taken from. So 2020, you had a budget, for example, and make it very simple. So you are recurrent and you are capital. On the capital side, if the government budget to spend $300 million for the fiscal year 2020 on capital projects, and at the end of the year, only $200 million was spent, Then you have $100 million that was unspent. You look to see if you have the cash, because when you have it in the budget, it's not cash yet. These are budgetary allocation. And at the end of the year, you look through every capital project to see where you did not spend because of the lockdown and the COVID situation. You look to see where you did not spend, and then you see if you have the cash, and that is where the money came from, the savings on the capital side of the budget.
Okay, colleagues, we're running out of time. So, Linda, you have the final question, and then we'll take closing statements from the ministers. Linda, quickly, please.
Thank you. Minister, can you, where I could understand you're pointing out that the money was gathered from unspent and where we possibly would have had cash. Can you tell us that this transaction involving WRB and government, was it concluded or partially almost concluded before the presentation of the 21 budget? I know that usually budget gathering starts from somewhere August. So was there any indication that this thing, I know that you had a date of December 29th, but the government negotiating team almost concluded that before the budget was presented for 2021. And in adding on to that, can you tell us who are the lead negotiators in coming to a final agreement? Who are these persons who sat on behalf of government and negotiate with the WRB lawyers and representation? And secondly, Grenada is currently listed on the regional stock exchange at $12 a share. Under the new structure, whilst we wait for the management, how would that affect Grenada's ability to continue to be a public IPO for this region?
I think the first question had to do
and,
with...
And before you said that other companies would have approached Grenada, WRB to buy the shares. Are you in a position to tell us the names of this company who would have approached WRB to buy the shares?
The first question of the conclusion of the negotiations, that took place just before Christmas. And when you were working with WRB, you do not take anything for granted. So no, before the 2021 budget was presented, we could not have said anything. The lead negotiators, the Minister Joseph and myself, the Attorney General, the Solicitor General, the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance, we all did, but I think it was led by Minister Joseph and myself, and we also had the external lawyers who represented us at the tribunal, being in close contact with WRB and their lawyers. So that was the team, but I could tell you, most of the other persons they came on much later after the groundwork was laid by Minister Joseph and myself, and I want to thank him for the time and his valuable contribution that he made in morning, night, weekends, and so forth as we worked on this particular project. Or the companies who showed that, many of the things, Grenada could tell you had two companies from the United States. You had one from Canada and one from Jamaica. And we all send them to WRB and say, whatever you worked out, fine, we will go with it. The public listing, the $12, the 12 shares, $12 per share, pay no attention to this. And nobody looked at this. WRB, when they were doing their research, neither did the government team. Because the $12 you had, if 2,000 shares or 10,000 shares traded, had only those shares. There was no transaction on the market. So pay no attention to this. If you will ask the people at the Eastern Caribbean Stock Exchange, they will also tell you the same thing. The company remains on the Eastern Caribbean Stock Exchange, so whoever wants to sell the shares on the stock exchange, they can continue to do so. And as it stands now, unless we take other actions to make it very simple, and I've discussed that, for our local people to buy shares. Because if we want to sell shares to a Grenadian, he or she must get a broker, and the state must get a broker, pay the broker just to transfer shares. So we'd have to look at what will happen when we're talking to our local people and only transferring shares to our local people. Yes, it remains on the stock market, and this, whatever is there, has no bearing whatsoever, because it was a few transactions done some years ago between the individual people and no more. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. All right, colleagues, so we're coming to the end. We have the opportunity now for the Honorable Ministers to make final closing statements. Minister Bowen?
So I want to thank the public and the press for their questions. What it has shown, one, is that the press and the general public, I think we hope, by listening to the other programs, they understand why we did not make a statement just before or long before we did. And I think the concern was there, WRB is making all this statement and we are not hearing anything. But we had to be particularly careful so that we have those signed warranties in our hand, because those were the arrangement in place. And we did not expect for WRB to shy away. But when they looked at the joint statement, they told us that they can't agree with the content. I think one of the critical factor was in that statement, it had excerpts from the framework agreement, which said that no announcement should be made prior. So if they accepted that, then they felt, well, I'm damaging myself because I made a significant amount of statements before. One person asked, well, couldn't you have taken them to court? What do you do, spend more money and go to Miami to take them to court? The idea is you refused. Although we had an arrangement, we left it there and we came to the public, but ensuring that we secured the warranties and the documents, the signed documents that we had. So I'm very happy that the public has accepted those points. They look and to what has happened, and I want to thank them for that. And the areas that we went on this morning showed a significant shift of concern, shift of the concern from, well, we want to know what happened. I think people went back to the reasons why we did not do certain things before, and I want to reiterate. And remember the story I gave you. When you look at certain institutions and certain powers, you have to be circumspect in how you react to them. Thank you again, and we will be there giving for the information on particularly this situation with respect to what existed before, and the work that went into Gren Lake, and the reason why we're going forward the way we are with the management contract. Thank you again for your questions.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Gregory Bowen. Minister Oliver Joseph.
Just to reassure the public that Gren Lake is now a state asset with government control, and there is no private company that has bought the 50% majority shares into Gren Lake. That is totally incorrect. So, and as we move forward, now that it is in the hands of government and put the new management in place, you will see benefits coming out of this decision. And in the long term, I'm sure everyone will be happy with the decision of this government.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ministers Gregory Bowen and Minister Oliver Joseph. Colleagues, thank you so much as well for joining us and for all your questions. And of course, for those of you who joined us on the Channel 22 or Facebook page and in the diaspora, we say thank you so much for being with us. Here's where we leave it for today. Thank you for being with us. My name is Leslie Ann Johnson. Have a great day.